Hey everybody, I'm Andy Schoenfeld. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Tatari. Super excited to be here along Nick and Chime. As I mentioned, I've worked with Nick for a while, so super excited to hear you kind of tell your version of the story of Chime's journey. Obviously, we've been a part of that for about 6+ years. It's been very exciting. So Nick, you want to give maybe a quick intro on your background?
Sure. I'm the head of growth marketing, or VP of growth marketing at Chime. I've been there just about 3 years. Beforehand, I was CMO of Series BC startups, and actually have had a relationship with Tatari for many, many years, more than the 6 years, right? So 3 years through Chime, and my growth team consists of paid and organic growth. We've got the go-to-market function, we've got the lifecycle function, and the growth product marketing function. So think the engineering and product teams that do the onboarding and enrollment. So lots of fun stuff going on.
Awesome. So I want to start a little bit out with Chime's growth journey. So obviously you guys are now one of the most successful fintech brands, right? Going up with some of the largest financial institutions in the world, which is unbelievable. You guys IPO'd, I think it was in May? June, there you go. Congratulations,
Thank you.
Of course, again. But I'm curious, obviously it wasn't always the easy days, so I'm curious to hear about the larger journey, and maybe a little bit of where TV fit in. Of course, we're going to unpack that a little bit deeper as we go. But
Sure. Raise your hand if you guys know what Chime is. Okay.
There we go.
We're the most loved banking app, right? We were started as a fee-free banking platform, right? So our mission is to become the #1, most loved banking app for people that make up to $100,000, right? So we started because the financial system is not built for you, right? And the average bank charges you hundreds of dollars of fees. So we said, like, what if we could do a fee-free version? And so Chime is about 12 years old. I've only been there for the last 3 years of the 12 years. But when Chime first started, it was scrappy D2C days. It's when, venture money was a little bit more easy to get and didn't need to be as accountable as it needs to be today. And we would raise around and literally, go put it into those platforms. Google, Facebook, raise around, put it in. Growth was cheap. We didn't actually realize that through some of the products we were launching, we call them hit records. We were actually building a brand and building brand love, right? Go figure, when you're a fee-free banking platform and that thing didn't exist, we were a first mover, and we gave people access to their pay 2 days before payday. It's meaningful. I work for that money, give me that money, right? Then we launched our Spot Me. We were one of the first people to bring the whole category to do fee-free overdraft, right? So you can swipe without confidence, with confidence, not without confidence. That was our next hit record. The next hit record, Credit Builder. We innovated a secured credit card. It feels like a debit card, and you can build credit with your own money without a security deposit. Little did we know, we were building this crazy NPS that's like better than any industry, and we did it organically through building the right products and doing right by our members. At the same time, our media team was not sophisticated. We were growing. So it was awesome. Then the pandemic hits. Guess what happens? Another exponential growth period for us. Why? Because we were the fee-free banking platform that gave you access to your money without all the BS and fees and gave it to you early. So we were helping people get their stimulus checks before, and we would front some of it, right? So we were really, really thoughtful there. Once the pandemic subsided, our growth started slowing, and the traditional media stuff and feeding those platforms didn't work the same, right? And even some of the TV stuff we were starting to do, right? News and politics was really easy and good and worked well for us when Joe was running against Trump, right? Everyone was watching the news. Right. And we had to find a different way. We had to rethink our portfolio. And so that's when really TV came into the mix for us. And it wasn't necessarily like a brand tax. It was a channel that we thought about like we did our performance channels, right? How do you start and think of it and holding it accountable and then move our way up the funnel? And I'll tell you a little bit about how we did that in a sec.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear. Obviously, after the pandemic, you guys went even heavier on TV. So I'm curious, was that the inflection point when you guys went from kind of experiment on TV to being a very large TV advertiser and it being the bulk of your spend?
I think so. I mean, at first, when growth stops working, you have to expand your portfolio, right? Think about how do I, think beyond just these DR last click channels, and how do you think about expanding? So that's something that I've done my whole career. Go in and expand. You go from 3 channels to 15 channels, right? And you understand the role of each of these channels. The way we were able to do it with TV is we treated it like it was a measurable channel first and then moved our way up the funnel, right? So we could see the spike, right, in our Tatari dashboard when we would air an ad. We could see it in our Google Analytics. We could tag all the way through an enrollment so we could quantify what that medium was doing. Then we threw in the how do you hear about a survey that everybody does, right? And we started looking at attributing back to our TV spend. Then we started doing a brand tracker. Everyone's like, what's a brand tracker at Chime? So 3 years ago, my boss came in and he came in about 6 months before I did, and we're talking about a brand tracker. And they're like, what's a brand tracker, right? And so we very intentionally, when we walked in, growth was so upside down that we found a way to get it much more efficient through building out this portfolio, and some of it being some of this TV stuff. But what we did is we actually carved out some of the money from the efficiency that we gained in our performance portfolio and put it in brand. And we didn't tell anyone, right? We're growth people. We're accountable for a budget and a return and a CAC, right? LTV to CAC thresholds. So we actually built the brand without telling anyone. And we'd already had all this amazing brand love, right? Everyone knew us for fee-free banking, liquidity, credit building. We'd done these kind of point solutions. And now it was time to start telling an ecosystem story at the top of the funnel, which we're doing in TV. And it's funny, my boss is our CMO, Vineet, and he jokes and says, all these D2C brands end up in this DR valley of death, right? It's when you try to squeeze water from the stone of all these DR last click measures. And I'm proud to say I might have maybe worked at some of these companies until I came to Chime, and I'm learning. And what was cool is we didn't just say, I need $30 million to do brand. We found our way through efficiency and taught the business how brand works. And we're still teaching the business the role of brand throughout the funnel. And it's not all the same measures and metrics. It's a combination of a bunch of things that we'll get into.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to maybe switch gears a little bit to hearing a little bit more about your evolution with us at Tatari. But of course, with that, right, a lot of marketers still use kind of traditional agencies, maybe some of the legacy agencies, the holdcos, and you guys chose a different path. A lot of it was in-housing and the way you structured your business internally. But I'm curious, like, what was missing in that model for you guys at Chime that didn't work?
Look, I grew up in that world. I started as a media buyer at Y&R, and then I went to OMD, and it was all about GRPs and CPPs and martini lunches. I miss those martini lunches. And it was math, but it was also relationships. And it worked then, but it wasn't creative. It's actually why I moved away from being a media buyer. It's like, well, you're not allowed to buy Howard Stern, and you have this market, and you need to hit this much, blah, 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 right? And so at Chime, and I've actually been lucky enough as a Tatari consultant to take a bunch of people onto television for the first time as an advisor and consultant. That traditional way, the barriers are too high. Right, a brand says, it's too expensive for me to get onto TV, and I need $500,000 to do a TV spot, and I don't know how to measure it. And post logs come when the quarter ends or when the month ends, and you're looking at measurement in arrears. And so we couldn't go that way. There was no way a startup at this size could start with those big holdco type way of buying. And I appreciate some of that stuff. It's important. But as a D2C startup, data is power and is king, and we have in-house teams. We use agencies for relationships and technology, right? And so it wasn't about, the man behind the curtain. Here's my money, go do my TV buy. I'm going to run it like as a performance channel, but I'm going to look at different metrics. And so it never even crossed our mind to go to a traditional agency versus working with someone that's kind of tech first, ad tech platform first. And I think I'm proud to say, I've watched Tatari kind of grow with us, right? I'm the kind of guy that was linear. No one can beat linear's reach and frequency before the pandemic. And I was at an insurtech called Gavi. You remember?
Yeah, I sure do.
And I used to tell these guys, like, nothing can match linear until the pandemic hit. And they converted me into a streaming guy. My portfolio went 50-50. But it's fun to say, I pushed them really hard and said, relationships matter. I want to be the first person NBC calls when somebody falls out of a game. And so we kind of grew up together in the space and kind of moving up the funnel. You know what I mean? And relationships still matter, but tech first.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. So you hit on it. Relationships matter. I'm curious, right? You obviously have hands-on keyboard tech. You know the relationships matter. So what does that mean from a day-to-day basis in terms of how Chime operates their team and how you kind of break that down? Can you give us examples of that?
Yeah. I mean, we run our dollars like it's all one growth portfolio and it's all accountable. But we don't run it like it's all last click needs to hit this one CPA, right? So we think, and we're starting to grow into this full funnel approach in how we think about things. So we run television like it's performance, but we don't optimize it like it's performance. And we know there's different things that we do with different parts of our buy. For instance, we have an upfront. That's about high reach, and that's about appointment viewing, and that's about getting our awareness numbers. But also, it's baked into my BAU, and I know what it's going to do for me at the bottom line. And even my DR dollars are tagged with the lift effect that I think that the brand dollars are going to give me. So every day, we look at this stuff and almost piss you guys off and try to optimize down to the creative, down to the network and linear, move stuff between streaming and linear. We've even got so sophisticated in-house, I've got dedicated folks. We've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 networks in linear with Tatari. And tier 3 is the real cheap stuff that I'm probably doing too much frequency, but it's printing awesome cheap enrollments for me, which offsets the high CPMs that I need to pay in streaming, because I'm getting unique reach in streaming that I can't get in linear. So there's all these clicks within a clicks, and I'm not saying we run it like it's all last click, Meta, or Google, but that infrastructure and way of thinking and taking a full funnel approach, we're neurotic, right? We're weekly optimizing creatives, right? So actually, we'll talk about that in our next section.
Yeah, for sure.
But we break out networks, performance, day parts, and linear, tiers, and have different targets for return on each of the tiers.
Do you guys
Streaming has a different level of accountability than linear.
That was going to be my question. Do you have different targets for streaming versus linear? And how
I
you guys think
do.
about that?
And it, like, I tell my teams I want it to all perform the same, but I'm also like human and understand that, you know, CPMs are vastly different. You can't run 15s. Well, you can, but you're just going to pay for a 30 on streaming. And so you just have to think differently about it. And so absolutely, we think differently and say, okay, your streaming cost per enrollment, right? That's your early indicator proxy metric, can be X% less efficient than your linear. Your tier 1 network can be Y% less efficient than your tier 3 linear network, which is different than your streaming network, which is different than my tentpole NFL Thursday Night Football buy.
Yeah, so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into kind of outcomes and measurement at a more granular level in a second. But something I really find remarkable about Chime has been your ability to really connect creative specifically to data and media. And so I'm curious, how do you guys think about that in practice? How do you break out creative strategy? And I think we're going to take a look at a few creatives in a minute as well.
You know, I'd say creative is probably one of our superpowers. And I think we've built this brand through authenticity and creative. And we have an in-house amazing creative team. We've got a creative director. I've got a killer partner, a guy named Orlando, who's VP of brand. And we're kind of like twins at the hip. We think about performance, but we think about brand. We're trying to build our brand and drive performance at the same time. And there's no reason why, you know, you can't do all the things. That said, we're really intentional. When you make a piece of creative, it has a role to play in the funnel. And so we've been misusing the funnel at Chime. We call it mid-funnel. What's mid-funnel mean? What's lower funnel mean? So we came up with our own version of the content framework, something that similar like Google did. And guess what? It looks just like a funnel, but it's sideways. And position is, you know, just what you think it is. It's the top of the funnel, right? And prove is just what you think it is, right? It's consideration and usage, right? So when we create things for position, it's we want you to know what Chime is, why we're here, and why you should care, right? And when I do prove content, which is more my testimonials, DR, bottom of the funnel, how do I get you to care so you know you're familiar and you're considering Chime? And so, you know, all the way from awareness to familiarity to conversion, you start and create things with intent to play the role that they need to in the funnel, but we're so neurotic with how we measure and pre-test and know our audiences that we use the ACE scores within iSpot. We use our own pre-testing and give ourselves scores, and we always aim for category-leading love scores and linkage scores, no matter what, if it's brand or if it's performance. And it's funny, when I show you some of the testimonials that my team makes, those are building our brand. And the brand team's like, no, ours are building the brand. We're all building the brand, and you'll find that my brand team is driving performance, right, at the same time.
And you're measuring that on a next day basis at Tatari. Like, how do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, look, the dashboard with Tatari sometimes is dangerous, but it's also amazing, right? When I deploy different dollars, when you hear me talk about the linear tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 networks, that's different than my upfronts, right? When I do upfronts, I might take my Deion Sanders or my, you know, if I do an NBA game that's a big playoff game, I might take my endemic NBA brand creative that we'll show you here in a little bit. But what I also do is I have multiple value props in my testimonials. You might want to be here for building your credit. You might be here for fee-free banking. You might be here for cashback rewards on your everyday spending, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I almost feed it like I do Meta. Feed TV, all these different assets, right? I have certain equities and attributes in my brand tracker that I want to move the needle on, just like awareness. But the testimonials, I feed the machine and I let the Tatari dashboard tell me what networks, what's resonating more, what's driving more of a response. So in certain networks, I might be heavier on my liquidity message around my pay, access to your pay in between pay periods without any fees. Where in some networks that might skew a different audience, it's about build your credit risk-free with this awesome Chime card.
Love it. Should we take a look at some creatives?
Yeah, let's look at some creatives.
All right. So we got 2 creatives. We have a brand creative and a testimonial, and then we'll have some anecdotes from.
Is the first one the
First one should be the brand creative.
So this, I'll play it, then I'll talk about it.
Hand down, man down. A fee-free withdrawal? Spectacular.
Thanks. Mark Jackson.
We got another one. Talk about a pro's pro. Magnificent. See, that's just beautiful banking.
No catchphrase?
You got to bank through Chime to get a catchphrase.
Well, but...
Not now. My man is building his credit score with everyday purchases. 75 points up in 6 months. Mama, there goes that man.
It's got some DR components.
Oh, I've got
in
like
there.
chills. I love that spot so much. I'm a big. I've had Warriors season tickets for like 20 years, and he was our coach for a little bit before we got Kerr. This is a really interesting spot. Did you notice I got all the value props in? You can walk away and you can say you know what Chime does, but this was a really smart brand level spot, endemically built, and ran in the places where Mark is commentating, right? And so we ran it for a reason to drive awareness and familiarity. But guess what? That thing cranked in my tier 1 networks in DR for sports, right?
Yeah.
My brand team gets so excited when their spots work for performance, just like I get excited when my testimonials I make work with ACE scores and brand love. So that's one of my favorite campaigns. We did Kendrick Perkins, we did Kenny the Jet Smith, and we were really thoughtful on where we aired these endemically on the networks that these guys commentate. Really, really cool stuff.
Yep. Awesome. And I think we're going to look at the testimonial as well.
I want to open my own fitness studio, but my old bank kept draining my savings with fee after fee. I was over it. That's why I love Chime. I can bank fee-free. No overdraft fees, no monthly fees, and I get access to over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. There's 24/7 live support, plus signing up took like 2 minutes. With those fees gone, I can use that money towards building my studio. So I got everyone I know to join. Join the millions of members, just like us, banking fee-free at Chime.
So that spot is part of our newer kind of banking portfolio spots, and we're kind of shaking up the guy on the couch look, just trying new things here. This spot scored in ACE scores and brand love as high as my Deion Sanders "You're Making It" spot that I was going to show today, but instead I wanted to show you my Mark Jackson spot. So if it, I dispel the notion of that DR spot can't build your brand at the same time, and so there's appeal there, but that is a hardworking spot at high frequency. And an example, that one is your fee-free banking spot, right?
So I know how quickly you're reviewing kind of the performance data on some of this stuff, right, with Tatari, but I'm curious at a brand level, how often are you analyzing that, and how quickly are you actually pushing that back to Tatari?
It's probably more than you would think, right? So we're looking at the dashboards day after, right? I try not to overreact because there's the notion of frequency and media bias and time and market. But there's those leading indicator metrics that I can see daily, if not weekly. The DR stuff, we try not to over-optimize too much, but the brand stuff on a monthly basis, right? So we'll take a look at the performance from the brand tracker and try to tie it back to the actions that we took in the media. We look at the How Do You Hear About Us survey and try to take it back to where we spent dollars within TV, et cetera, and so forth.
Got it. Awesome. All right, so we're going to talk about accountability and outcomes. We talked a little bit about this, but you've mentioned to me in the past, right, like the old school days of GRP and how you kind of focus on real business outcomes has changed. I'm curious if you can share with the audience how you focus on metrics, specifically like CAC and LTV for the business for TV.
Yeah. I mean, my whole job is I have a budget and I have to hit a number, right? And baked into the number of new primary account bank members that we've got, I have a certain cost per acquisition, which is predicated on a CAC to LTV threshold, right? So I have an aggregate target, right? And then it's my job and my team's job to figure out how do you hit that target? How do you build your brand and drive performance? How do you fill the water spigot and capture that demand all at the same time? So it's a bunch of art and science. And we do upfronts with TV, and I put the dollars differently into my annualized way. And I think, so I almost take my upfront dollars and bake them in and throughout my full year into my CAC. And then I'll take sort of my mid-funnel and my DR dollars with streaming and linear and run it through like I do my day trading on a monthly and quarterly basis with all of my digital channels, right? And so, in the end, if you're a growth marketer, you're a marketer in general, it's about a portfolio, right? And so my CAC on a last click basis with a multiplier in TV is different than non-brand search and is different. But I know the role of it, and I've just brought on a new MMM partner. So I have a cross tabulation of art and science, the Tatari dashboard, the immediate response, my brand tracker, the how do you hear about us study. When I chirp TV up and down, and when I spend TV differently, my MMM tells me what it does for me.
Yep.
So it's a ton of art and science, and I'm going through 26 annual planning right now and trying to answer this question: how much upfront TV dollars, how much performance TV dollars, how much meta dollars, and going through all this stuff now, so it's super topical.
I'm aware. My team is let me
Sorry, I was like, where's the reach and frequency?
Yeah, exactly. All good. So I think we're winding down here, but maybe kind of last question for you. Maybe there'll be some questions from the audience. Where do you see the biggest opportunities ahead? And what's your advice maybe to CMOs that are kind of maybe still stuck in kind of the old models?
Yeah. I think don't listen to a fly-by-night like online video company pretending to be a TV company saying that they can solve all your TV problems. You could probably get started with some of them and probably see some return, but that's not going to scale. I also think like paying attention to streaming differently is something everyone's got to do. The CPMs are higher, you can't run 15s, but the industry is moving there. I think the rates might follow as the audience follows. I see like NBC doing this really interesting stuff with NFL and saying it's Peacock first. So I think don't sleep on streaming. I know that the eyeballs came, but I think, it's less flexible, it's harder to buy, it's less accountable. I think that's all going to evolve over time, at least I hope it does. Also, I think the winners are going to marry data, technology, and relationships. If anyone tries to tell you relationships don't matter, they're full of it. And if anyone tells you can programmatically do television for the rest of your life, they're full of it. Should you do some programmatic? Absolutely. Is that the one, one size fits all? No, it's not. And then the one thing, two other things. One is, I think you kind of got the note, but like creative really matters, right? And I was a CMO of a startup before this where it was just dirty DR, founder, hey, I'm Nick, we created this thing. And I tried to beat it 100 times. And I couldn't beat this ugly
I've
creative.
seen that ad many times.
Hey, I'm Nick, we created Gabby. If you want to see me on air. No, my mom thought I was famous. I was like, Mom, I shot that commercial for $12,000 during the pandemic. But what I didn't realize was I wasn't building the brand, and I was overexposing that same frequency, and I wanted that thing to work differently. And every time I brought a new creative in, I wanted it to work just the same. It's like 4 or 5 years ago. That's not how the world works, right? So creative matters, intentionality of why you're making something, and being thoughtful about how you measure and how it fits within the portfolio. Also, it seems like in some of the stuff I showed you at Chime, you can start to build brand with some of your performance stuff and then get up here over time. You don't have to start up here and build a sexy brand spot. And then I'd say what I said earlier, like don't think about TV as vanity spend. Don't think about it as non-brand search type of spend. Think about it as a huge important play as you're growing your business and as you're growing your portfolio. And it can grow with you. I'm the type of guy, you've heard me say it a couple of times, I move my way up the funnel versus come down the funnel. And so that's been my journey, and that's my advice to folks is put the measures in place, evolve with it as you evolve over time. You're gonna hit diminishing returns with your strategy multiple times. You just have to stay on it and be thoughtful.
Awesome, I love that. Thank you, Nick, for your time.
Yeah.
Really appreciate. I think everybody probably learned a lot here today. Thank you from behalf of Tatari. It's been an amazing journey with you guys, and obviously congrats on all the success.
Thank you, guys.